At first sight, today's gospel seems to continue or contain nothing new or startling that was not already known by the Jews of the Old Testament. Indeed, the words, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind," were words written on the hearts of every Jew. And to this day, they perform part of the daily prayer a devout Jew is required to say. This prayer is referred to as the Shema because it begins with Hebrew Shema Israel, which means, "Listen, O Israel. The Lord our God is one." And it continues with the words we just quoted. And yet there was a certain paradox about today's gospel reading, and that it tells us that love of God is realized by our love of each other. In other words, our love of God is illusory if it stops short with God and does not result in loving each other. Reaching out to everyone without exception, even our enemies. But then a word of caution. Love of neighbor, if it is divorced from love of God, can well become refined self-love. For one can easily end up loving others purely for the response one gets from those that they love, for the feeling of satisfaction and self-gratification one derives from being generous and kind to them. A Jewish rabbi named Hillel, a renowned scholar, a scripture and ethical teacher of his generation, who had a great following before the birth of Christ, was asked, "Which is the greatest commandment?" He gave the famous reply, "What you hate for yourself, do not do to your neighbor. This is the whole law. The rest is commentary." Jesus, however, stated that love of God linked with love of neighbor jointly formed the greatest commandment. Commenting on that, the advice of St. Augustine was, "Love God first, and then do whatever you will." Meaning that if you were really loving God with all your heart, soul, and strength and mind, then we cannot but be obedient to his will, which wants others to share that love. St. John the Evangelist, who saw all the events of Christ's life on earth in terms of love, and kept preaching about this virtue to the early Christians, to the extent that they became wearied of it and asked him to talk about something else. St. John, in his first letter, put it forcibly like this: "Anyone who says, 'I love God,' and hates his brother is a liar. Well, how can a man who does not love a brother that he can see love God whom he has never seen?" So this is the commandment that he has given us, that anyone who loves God must also love his brother. If we embrace this commandment, if we try and put it into practice as the saints did, then we will be doing something which is truly radical, which to a non-Christian outsider will often see as odd, a seeming contradiction, difficult to understand. These seeming contradictions abound in our faith, for we believe that life comes from death, that gain comes from loss, that receiving comes from giving, and that Christ had to die and come to life again, that we might share new life with him in heaven. We profess to be followers of Christ, who made a complete offering of himself to the Father. "Not my will, but your will be done." Who gave his life, his energies, his time in the service of others. Who returned to the Father devoid of any earthly goods, the clothes he had worn ceasing to be his before he yielded up his spirit, having been made over by lots to the possession of his executioners. All this does not imply that we have to tread exactly the same path as Christ. What it does indicate, however, is that our surrender to God does not mean that we retreat into a paradise of unreal spirituality. It means that if we love God, then we have to concern ourselves with others, with the members of our family and community. It means that we must rise above ourselves and our own interests and become convinced from Christ's words that St. Paul, that the greatest happiness is giving rather than receiving. The world is too much for us, the poet Wordsworth wrote. Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. We pass this way but once, and while we are on our way, let us do as much good as we possibly can with our God-given powers and gifts that each one of us has, and serving God and others. But always keep in mind as well the promise of Jesus. Whoever remains in me, with me in him, bears fruit and plenty. And because of the presence of Jesus, this fruit will last. Christianity is a messy thing, not easy, not for sissies. You are called to be a saint. Sometimes you think you are, but that's only pride. But God working through us can change the world. I often think about our politics in this country. Where is the church? Where is the church guiding us? If each one of us really had a piece of God, would we not be able to bring justice to the world? Would we not be able to bring Eden right here with us?